Section 1. You will hear a survey company representative ringing a person to obtain some information. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hello?
Hello? Who is this?
Hello, I'm a representative of the Tally-Ho Survey Company, and I'd like to ask you a few questions regarding exercise.
Ah, that's an interesting subject.
The representative will ask questions about exercise, so exercise has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello?
Hello? Who is this?
Hello, I'm a representative of the Tally-Ho Survey Company, and I'd like to ask you a few questions regarding exercise.
Ah, that's an interesting subject.
Yes, we think so too.
But I'm afraid I'm a bit busy at the moment.
Don't worry, this will only take about 4 minutes at the most. It's 10:25 now, so it will all be over by 10:30.
Well, all right, if it's that short.
It will be. So, one of the first things I need to know is where you are. That is, which suburb or area of the city. The last client was in Blackburn, for example.
Blackburn, that's close to me. I'm in Box Hill.
Another eastern suburb, then. I have a friend in Box Hill, too. Interesting place. Now, I need your approximate age for this survey. Are you younger than 20, between 20 and 29, 30 and 39, and so on?
I'll turn 40 in a few months, so that puts me in the 40 to 49 age group.
Well, that's in a few months, so right now you're in the 30 to 39.
Oh, right, so put that then.
OK. Now, I need to know your occupation. The last caller was a housewife, for example. The one before that, a teacher.
I used to be a teacher too, teaching cookery.
And now?
Now you can just put domestic duties. Actually, I hope to begin a new job soon as a cook, but that won't be for some time yet. I have to wait for my husband's restaurant to open.
Cook? That sounds interesting. But it's domestic duties for now. OK, that just leaves some information about your family. This is not obligatory at all, so if you don't want to answer, that's fine.
What sort of information exactly?
Oh, it's very broad. Married with children, single mother, that sort of thing. The last customer said she was a single mother.
I'm married and not a mother. Put married, no children.
I'm married with children myself, but I'll put in your details. And that finishes the profile and just leaves the actual survey itself if you're ready to proceed.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
All right, let's begin the survey now about your exercise habits.
I'm afraid I don't exercise much at all.
Well, the main question is in what form you take your exercise, however little that may be. For example, in just cleaning. Do you clean the house?
My husband does the cleaning, actually, but I walk to the supermarket and shops very often, up to 4 times a week.
I'll put that then, unless there's something else?
Nothing else, really. But I diet. I'm very strict about what I eat. Oh, and I do yoga, although that's not very energetic. More a form of relaxation and to tighten my muscles.
They're both important, of course. But what about sport? Do you undertake any sporting activities? This could be very infrequent. In the past, for example.
My husband plays basketball at the local school, and I sometimes watch. When he was younger, he was in a basketball team, but I never participated.
Have you done anything at all?
I used to hike in a nearby national park.
Well, that's a definite physical activity, so I'll put that, but not basketball. All right, that just leaves future exercise intentions. Do you plan or expect to do, at some stage, any form of exercise?
I once dreamt of doing modern dance, but that's never going to happen. Realistically, I'm thinking about going swimming at the local aquatic centre, although my husband thinks we should just jog. I can't see myself doing that, though. Too tiring.
I can understand. I used to jog too, and it really makes you sweat. I'd say swimming's a much better option.
But I'll be starting this job as a cook in my husband's restaurant. I imagine I'll be very tired doing all those late shifts. But if I have any energy left over, I might go to the aquatic centre to release some stress.
All right, well, that's the end of the survey. Thank you very much for your time.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a childcare worker telling some mothers about the advantages of her centre. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Stanfield Childcare Centre. Now I know you're all new mothers and you like to cling to your children. You've certainly spent a lot of time raising them to the age of 4 and are perhaps reluctant to leave them here at our centre. Well, one of the first things you should understand is that here it is safe. Very safe. Look around and you'll see that every room has padded walls. Other centres have standard painted walls, but here we have invested a lot to ensure your children will not hurt themselves when running around and possibly tripping over. This padding extends around all corners. That is, the areas most likely to bruise and cut your active little child. So, you can rest assured that any accidents of a physical nature are not likely to happen here. Now, you don't want to dump your child at this centre and let them waste their time. You want them to learn, and that's one of the greatest assets of our establishment. Our staff are not only trained childcare workers, but all of them have a special skill which they can impart to your child. Whether it be teaching the ABC, some basic mathematics, artistic skills, or physical education. We are particularly known for our preschool literacy program and have a wealth of learning toys specially designed to develop your child's potential. Of course, one concern many mothers have is that, in environments such as these, colds and flus and other viral nasties can be easily spread around. It's a very legitimate concern, and one which we take seriously, and we pride ourselves on our precautions. For a start, unlike most centres which clean with standard detergents, we disinfect every service at the end of every day, using a special disinfectant wash. Some places just wipe surfaces daily with a damp cloth, but not us, and that's just the start. We also physically check your children when they arrive every day, and if we feel your child is sick, we ask him or her to wear a face mask to ensure germs are not transmitted. If your child is noticeably sick, then we ask you to take them back home to recover. This might sound a little unkind, but we hope parents can understand that these measures are for the benefit of all.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 17 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 17 to 20.
Now at Stanfield Childcare Centre, we have excellent childcare officers, and let me briefly introduce them. We have Susan, Andrea, Bella, Kathy, Lisa and Liz. They're all fully trained and come with some individual assets which make them even better. Bella, for instance, knows children very well, having worked here for 5 years, and Kathy has her own family, 2 little girls, so she can talk to you with first-hand knowledge of what it's really like to raise children. But getting back to Bella, she often relaxes here after work, spending long hours chatting to parents, as does Kathy, in fact. But in terms of hours, nothing can compare to Andrea, who will sometimes spend the night here, staying in our overnight room. Why? Because this centre is very friendly and simply a great place to be. Bella, for example, used to be quite shy herself, but now is marvellous with the little kiddies, as outgoing as any of them. We let Kathy, though, deal with the particularly quiet and introverted children, since having her own family, she knows what can really bring them out. Of course, what better way to do this than with yummy homemade cakes, and Kathy often gets these from Bella, who can make some of the best in town. Yes, everyone here brings something special, which is why we're one of the best childcare centres in the business.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3.
Section 3. You will hear a student called Bobby talking to his tutor about the research project. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 23. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 23.
Hi, Bobby. Go ahead and sit down. Tell me about your research project.
Well, I decided to research football and keys for success on a football team.
That sounds great. What are the guidelines for the test? Did the teacher talk to you about it in class?
No, everything is on a handout that was passed out. It says that the first draft is due at the end of next week and the second and third are due later on in the month. I don't understand why we have to keep revising and fixing it. Is this assignment really that important?
Well, this project is a major requirement for passing 11th grade English and will go on your permanent record.
Oh, really? Does that mean it will affect what English level I am placed in next year?
Well, not exactly. You need a good grade to move on, but it is your overall grade and teacher recommendation that determines what level of English you are placed in next year. Anyway, tell me about your topic choice. Do you play football?
Well, actually, it's because my father loves the sport. He watches it every weekend.
Cool. It's a good idea to report on something you're interested in.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 24 to 30. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 24 to 30.
I see you worked hard calling players and the head coach to talk, so let's see what information you got.
Well, you have to listen carefully to the first call on the recording. It's really hard to hear because the background noise is louder than the person's voice.
Yes, it is a bit tough to discern. I'm afraid the player's answer is too short as well. You will have to interview him again and try to get him to give a better answer.
Okay, I thought that might happen. I will call him again tomorrow.
Moving on, let's look back at this question. You asked, Tell me about a time when you learned a major life lesson through playing football and explain how that has shaped the person and player you have become now, and how you hope to pass on that lesson. It is a great idea for a question, but in an oral interview it is far too complex. I would advise you to break it up into multiple parts to get a better response.
I guess you're right. I wouldn't want to have to provide an answer to a question like that. I will simplify it. I found that when I asked players this question, it took too much time because they were struggling to answer the question completely. In fact, this is the question Joe Billings was answering when the tape ran out.
He did tend to ramble on all the questions, didn't he?
He sure did.
I would recommend that when you go back and interview players again, that you use a more sophisticated recording device. This recording is spotty, which indicates that the equipment wasn't working consistently.
Okay, I guess it probably wasn't the best idea to use the sound recorder on my phone. Hey, could you give me some feedback on the content of the report itself?
Sure. Let's start by focusing on your topic. While I like that you chose to cover football, it seems inexplicit. The keys for success of a player and team is quite an interesting topic, but what is your thesis? That is to say, what conclusions can you draw from your research? I would suggest coming up with a strong thesis statement and then shaping your report based on that.
Is it really too vague? I put a whole lot of facts into it. I list the top 10 goal scorers in football history and later on provide statistics for a few of the most famous coaches and their records as coaches.
I think that's great that you included these facts, but I think you focus too much on the facts and not enough on connecting these facts to make your point.
Ah, I see. Okay. So it looks like I have quite a bit of work to do before the deadline.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear a talk on the research of the graphical symbol. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the graphical symbol. A graphic symbol is a written symbol that is used to represent speech, such as those used in the Greek alphabet. The term graphic symbol encompasses anything from the logographs used in Egyptian hieroglyphic writing to ancient Chinese pictograms. Early symbols were based on pictographs and ideograms before they were developed into logographic writing systems. These systems are still in use in some non-literate cultures in Africa, the Americas, and Oceania. Indeed, elements of pictography are still found in modern Chinese characters, and it is often an interesting exercise to trace the origins of some Chinese characters. Pictographs remain in common commercial use today as signs, instructions, or statistical diagrams. Road signs and public toilet signs, and even flat pack assembly instructions utilizing pictures, are considered pictographic. Ancient graphic writing systems provide researchers with a wealth of knowledge about past civilizations. In 1799, one of the most important historical discoveries was made by accident when members of Napoleon's expedition to Egypt found a stone in Rosetta that exhibited 3 different scripts. The stone, now known as the Rosetta Stone, was studied in significant depth by scholars and was first deciphered by Frenchman Jean-François Champollion in 1822. He was able to correctly determine the phonetic values of the symbols, and later research has confirmed his findings. In many of these symbols, lines are used to portray a multitude of meanings, and knowledge and understanding of these lines holds the key to comprehension of graphic writing systems. A key moment in the history of communication was the invention of the camera obscura, or camera. Although the concept can be traced back to the 5th century BC Chinese philosopher Mo Ti, the first photographic image was ultimately created in 1826 by Joseph Nicéphore Nicéph. Photography, as it was later known, enables researchers to piece together and better understand history. Today, photography forms a huge part of everyday life, and most publications contain a vast number of photographs. Photography is used in advertising and is now becoming a way to increase awareness of existing world issues. For example, animal welfare charities are increasingly using photography to advertise animals that are at high risk of endangerment. Charity workers are sometimes flown to far-flung locations to document the suffering endured by high-risk animals in an attempt to raise human awareness of their consumption activities and how they impact others. One recent high-profile campaign was undertaken by attaching a camera to the foot of a bird in order to obtain photographs of the animals in their natural habitats and understand how often they come into contact with human waste. A soon-to-be-released documentary about the suffering of animals on Midway Island shows the full extent to which human consumption is harming animals thousands of miles away from us. As photography continues to progress, with the use of drones now becoming somewhat commonplace, we should expect more and more objects to be included in the future, expanding the horizon of photography ever further. Indeed, the downward pressure on traditional media prices means that media companies are being forced to get creative on how to make a profit. Many have found that the answer to this lies in advertising, and companies are now willing to devote a large portion of their budgets to advertising in newspapers. By the same token, marketing has become an essential part of a company's business model, often meaning the success or failure of a company. As a result, much time and money has been pumped into the development of effective branding, with attractive packaging playing a large role in this. However, many governments are now seen to be cracking down on marketing and packaging in an attempt to protect consumers from being misled. In particular, tobacco companies are now subject to ever-increasing regulation. For example, in the United Kingdom, legislation is soon to pass preventing any form of branding or differentiation on cigarette packaging in efforts to curb the harmful effects of smoking. Finally, one must not forget the fundamental role that graphic writing systems have had to play in mathematics. Graphs, icons, and diagrams often form the very basis of these branches of academia. Indeed, one needs to look no further than chemistry's periodic table to see a perfect example of graphic writing systems in use today.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test.